Welcome, my dear students of Class 9. This is Tele and Radio Tutoring from the Directorate of School Education, Nagaland. And today, our class, we are going to discuss about informal letter. So you will find it on page 25, informal letter. So now, many of you must be wondering, why do we have this informal letter in our course? Maybe you are thinking that we do not necessarily write letters to our friends anymore. Maybe you are wondering in that way. But we are going to discuss a few things about why it is very important for you to learn this informal letter, or for that matter, any kind of letter writing. Now, yes, we do have a lot of the influence of technology where you can send messages, where you can talk to your friends, but when it comes to writing, it is a different matter here. These are the advantages of letter writing. When you write letters, it helps you express yourself better. And in fact, a famous person said that writing makes you an exact person. So when you write, you choose the words properly, you are conscious of the words that are going into your letter and so on. And so it helps you express yourself better. So that is one of the important things why we need to also practice letter writing. Another important thing why we write letters is that we use it to communicate with people. Again, I am repeating this. Maybe you are thinking that we can communicate with our friends, our relatives, our near and dear ones through so many applications, technological applications. But like I said, we need to, in order to become a good writer, you need to write and practice. So that is what we are going to help you with and guide you through this letter writing. Now, informal letter writing, first of all, we are going to talk about the style here. So you may want to note down these points. So when we say style, how do we write a letter? Many of us, we know that in a normal conversation, we can carry on talking, but when it comes to writing, how do I start, how do I begin? Those are some confusion that we have. And this year, you in class 9, I'm sure you are being introduced to more detailed information about letter writing. So you would have to understand what is the style of an informal letter. Why? Because there are different kinds of letters that you would be required to write later on in future, and certain specific styles goes with a specific kind of writing. So here, when we say informal letter and style, you can use personal pronoun. In the previous class, we have talked about personal pronouns such as I and we. Why? Because informal letters are for personal communication. So you would use I or we. Now, the next point that you need to remember here is that you write letters to talk about your own personal events, all right? So personal events. Or you can say news that you want to share with your friends or relatives. So here we write informal letters to people that we know. Maybe it is your friend, maybe it is your relatives. So the fourth point here is you write it to your close people, or we can say here, to be more precise, your friends or relatives. So that is some of the styles. So naturally, if you know that it is to be written to your friends or your relatives or to your close people, you have to, this is a tip, you have to keep in mind that maybe if you are lost for words, what you can do is imagine, pretend that your friend or your relative is sitting next to you, and that way the flow of conversation would be much more friendly. So the next point that you need to remember here is that the tone of your letter. When we say tone, we are also talking about the language, all right? So the tone of your letter should be friendly and warm. So this is why I was giving you the tip. Imagine that your friend or your relative is sitting next to you, and when you are with your friends and you are talking to your friends, the flow of conversation is endless, and you can go on talking and on and on. So when you have that picture in your mind, when you start writing, there will be so many news and events that you would want to share. So you would have no problem writing a full page of a letter to your friends or relatives. So these are some of the important things that you need to remember when we say style. Use personal pronouns such as I or we, and the second point here is talk about personal events and news. And even in your questions, you will be, for informal letter, you will be getting questions to write a letter to your friend, write a letter to your aunt, and so on. So it will definitely be a topic on your own personal experience. Then we always write informal letter only to people whom we know, all right? So close people, friends, relatives. Then the tone, that is your language, it should be friendly. It should be friendly and warm, which means it is not very formal language, all right? You can go with friendly, everyday conversation, simple language. So that is another point that you can also try to remember. This tone is more or less the same thing with simple language or vocabulary. So there you have it. That is the style of informal letter. Now we are going to move on to structure or format. So for structure or format, I need you to turn to page 25, and we would also be referring to page 26. So structure or format. The style is a different matter here. Format is how it should be presented. Where are the key elements that should go into the letter? That's what we are going to discuss now. And as you can see in your textbook on page 25, a lot of examples are given here, and it is clearly mentioned there. You know, your textbook is actually very student friendly. All you have to do is read it, and it's very easy for you to understand. However, for now we are going to take a look at the format here. So let's say that this is your page, and you always begin with the sender's address. The number one here is sender's address. And after that comes the date. In informal letter, what you can do is you need not necessarily give the year, but if you wish, you can also put it. Then comes salutation, or we can say greeting. You know, when it comes to greeting, many students struggle. How should I start? You know, because greeting is the section where you start. So remember, it is supposed to be friendly and warm. So how do you usually start a conversation? You can use that same thing in your letter writing as well, because that would actually help you give the tone. The language would become naturally simple, and free flow of conversation would be there. So instead of the usual, how are you, you know, you can also try, hello my dear friend, I am doing this such and such, all right, and I want to tell you about it. You can start it in that way also. But if you are struggling, you can always address it with dear. Dear, and then the name. Let's say here, let's go with dear Nishi. Now in your text, that is what you will find here, you will not find the name, but dots are being given, which means you need to enter the name, all right? Now, again, letter writing is also always changing. Since it is to do with language, the way we speak or the language that we use keeps on changing or evolving. So in our textbook, you will find that there is no mention of a punctuation, such as full stop or comma. Some people prefer it in this way, without any full stop or comma, but let me tell you that many people still prefer the old format. So if you are one who is also one who prefer the old format, you can also put a comma. But this is very debatable, all right? Let me put across that this is very debatable because many academicians, they debate on whether to use it or not. So what I would suggest here is that you can also ask your teachers and let them help you know which one to go with. For now, since I'm very old school, I would be going with a comma here. So dear Nishi, and then you can put a comma, and after that we can start with the purpose. Now you are writing a letter because you want to communicate something to your friend or your relative. So after that salutation or greeting, what you can do is start with why you are writing the letters. You need not necessarily say that I am writing this letter to you because, okay? But if you are really struggling, of course, you can start in that way, but you can also start the way how you would have start a conversation. Just the other day I went to visit the zoo and I saw all these interesting things and I want to tell you, but you were not there, so I'm writing this letter to you, and so on. So that's how you can go about with your letter. There are so many ways to start and not just how are you. And regarding how are you, starting your letter with how are you, this is not always applicable to the other forms of letter writing, all right? We are only, sometimes our exposure is only to that how are you starting off a letter. But when we get so drilled into that, we apply that even in other letter writing forms. That is only for informal. And remember, even if it's informal, again, there are different kinds of informal letters. So for instance, take the example of condolence letter, informal condolence letter. Condolence here means offering your sympathy. So when you are offering your sympathy to someone, you cannot start your letter by saying, how are you? Obviously that person is in great grief or feeling very sorry, so you can start with, I'm really sorry to hear the news that such and so on. All right, so how are you? Remember, this is a little tricky, and like I said, many of you are being taught and start off with how are you, so make sure that for condolence letter that is not necessary, all right? Now, let's move on to the next point here. The next point here is the body section, all right? So in the body section, you make sure you break it down further into paragraphs, all right? I'll put it here. And for those of you who are tuning through the radio, I hope you are also noting these down. So point number 5 is the body section. Make sure you break it down into paragraph. Now, how can we break it down into paragraph? All right. Sometimes students would write their letter writing in one full page without any full stop and comma, no paragraph, which means that the whole letter is being, the reader is supposed to read it without even pausing for breath, they would have to read that letter, So make sure that you break it down into paragraph. In other words, another tip here is keep in mind of the reader. Who is going to read? To whom you are writing that letter? Keep that in mind, and like I said, the flow of conversation would be very normal and simple. So break it down into paragraph. And how do we break it down into paragraph? Do we just randomly choose some few sentences, take it in the first paragraph and then go with the second? No, that's not what we do. In one paragraph, one topic, all right? You can talk about one news. Let's say, I'll put it here. One topic here in the sense, one main information, you can put it in the one paragraph and then explain it further or describe it further and continue to the next topic, and then that next topic would be a connection to the first one, but it will not be the repetition of the first paragraph. So break it down into paragraphs, and then of course then afterwards, let's say you can have as many paragraphs as you can, all right, provided that you have enough time in the exam. So as many paragraphs as you can, and then comes the closure. So in the closure, sometimes when we get really passionate about telling our friends what is happening in your life, we talk on and on and on, or write on and on and on, and then when it comes to closure, you have no words left. So you usually sign it off with saying, that's all for now, that's what I want to tell you, and then you stop the letter. If you do that, you are going to ruin your letter writing, all right? You are going to stop it abruptly, that the reader will not feel happy or satisfied with it. So make sure you stop the letter with a polite closure. So you can write, that's all I have for now, but I am looking forward to your reply, or give my love to your families, and so on. That's how you can also conclude. Now, we are also very influenced by abbreviated words such as the XOXO and all. You can also use that, provided that your teachers are okay with it. All right, since it's informal, I'm sure it is fine, but in some cases, not many people actually prefer it. So in order to be on the safer side, maybe you can reserve that when you're really using technologies, for instance, writing an email or an SMS. But if you are lost for words, I'm just suggesting you can also try that. Then after the closure, the seventh point here is again you would be referring to your signing off here, letter ending. Now in your letter ending, you would give your friend's name, lots of love or hugs and kisses. You can also say in that way, your dear friend, and you can also sign it off in that way. So the name and the signing off, the name, and that's how you would conclude your letter. Now, here are the other important elements that you need to look at. So for that, we are going to refer to our text here. An example is given on page 26. You would find on page 26, you would find that an example, a format is given here, and what you see is that you also have a box here. But make sure that when you actually write a letter in the exam, or for that matter, for real, make sure you do not draw the box. We don't draw a box when we write letters. This is just a sample, that's why we have the box, to draw your attention to that format. So please do that, and as you can see, very quickly I'll point it out, it started off with the address, sender's address, date, then salutation. Then in the first paragraph, if you can quickly go through it, you will find that in the first paragraph is the introduction part, and the person is talking about introducing, getting to know one another. In the second paragraph, where she lives. The third paragraph, she's talking about her family. Then the fourth paragraph, hobbies. So that's how we get to know a person. When we meet new people, that's what we usually talk about. We talk about our families, how many family members we have, what you love, your hobbies, and so on. See, so likewise, you will find that it is breakdown into paragraphs. Remember, your body has to have a paragraph. So that's how you can write your letters, from one point to the other point, leading to the other, and then closure. Remember, you close it with polite words and not abruptly. Then you give the letter ending. Now, the next point that you need to remember here is that, as you can see in your text, everything is on the left-hand side. Sometimes we are worried about, where do I put my sender's address? Is it on the right-hand side or on the left-hand side? We get confused. But as you can see in your text, it is clearly given, everything starts from the left-hand side. Now, again, some students get confused with, do I leave a few space? You know, you get confused in that way, even if it's on the left-hand side. So what you can do is, you have your page there, you have your margin there. You can use that, all right? The margin, use that. So what we would have is, all right, let's say this is your page, and you can start off with sender's address, date, then again your salutation. So everything on a straight line, it should follow that format, which means you need not worry about leaving a few space when you start your greeting. You don't have to go here and say, dear such and such. That would be again wrong. So start on the left-hand side, let it be follow down sequence in the straight line in this manner. So that's how you should be writing your informal letter writing. Now for the next one, I need you to turn to page 59. Please turn to page 59. We would be discussing about informal invitation. Okay, so on that page you will find the informal invitation. Since we are talking about informal letters, we would also talk a little bit about informal invitation. Now this is, don't be scared, because this is not going to be a new thing for you, since now you have already learned about informal letters. So informal invitation informal invitation, you write this down, it follows the same format, all right? Just as we have discussed about informal letter, it follows the same format. So point number 1 is same format. In other words, the structure that we talked about, that everything is on the left-hand side, the sender's address, the date, the salutation, and so on. The only difference that you will find here is the subject, all right? You would have to give a specific subject here. Now, the language, the style can be the same thing. It can be friendly, but not over friendly, such as you go and use abbreviated words and so on, because this is an invitation, so you have to keep that in mind. Now, if you look into your question here, I'll read out on page 59, exercise 3. You are the sports captain of your school. A well-known sports personality lives in your locality. You would like to invite him or her as the chief guest for your school annual sports day. So now this has to be informal, but the language, this is why, depending on the question, the language, the tone of the language would also change a little bit, all right? So read your questions carefully, and that would give you the clue as to how you should go about with your answers. So remember, it has the same structure, it has the same format. The only difference here is that you would have the subject, and the subject needs to be, supposing here our subject is that of inviting a sport personality. So subject here is invitation for, and then you mention for what kind of event, all right, for your sports, annual sports in your school. So for that event, where? In your school, and so on. So that is your subject, and I need you to underline your subject with your pencil. In the exam, make sure you use a pencil to underline the subject. Why? Because you see, people in the offices, they will be getting plenty of applications and letters. You know, they do not have the time to go through every letters and word for word. So when you write the subject in a very clear manner, they know the purpose. Remember, we talked about the purpose. We always begin with the purpose. So remember that when you put it in that way, it becomes very easy. And so you need to choose your words wisely. What are the main informations that need to go there? Do not make it too lengthy. Make it a little short and precise. The only required information should go there, all right? And actually, if you can master this art, it would have, you would have no problem writing your email writing as well, because the same thing applies in your email writing. You have an example there in your text, a format. So you have the name of the school, you can write the name of the school. That is the difference that you will find. Then the same thing, the same format follows: sender's name and address. You are to write it as the school captain, let's say, and date, salutation. So in this salutation, you can start with dear such and such, but you can also, since if it is a little formal, you can say sir or madam and so on. Then subject statement. Like I said, I've already pointed out, write down the subject, write it in short, precise manner for what purpose it is, and then followed with name of the school. For instance, if your school name is, let's just say, to go for a very quickly short word, GHSS, all right? GHSS wishes to invite you to, all right, to such and so on. Then you mention the event. The next part here is mention the event, occasion, and additional details. Where is it going to happen? When? Date, time, all right? Where? Place. Then complementary clause. In complementary clause here, many people still go with thanking you in anticipation. But that complementary clause here is not, nowadays it is getting out of fashion. Let me put it in that way, all right? So, but if you wishes to use it, that is well and fine, provided that you also discuss with your teachers, all right? Then you close it in that way, and or you can say that we are looking forward to your presence, all right? You can close it in that way, then give your name and designation. What is designation here? Designation here is you are writing it as the school captain, let's say. So that is your designation. So you can write, let's say your name is Loba, so you say Loba and then school captain of GHSS and so on. Then that's how you conclude. So remember, the format is the same thing. Sender's address, date. In invitation here, since our question is about invitation and on referring to school, on top you can write your school name. So sender's name, date, salutation, the same format here, or greeting we can say, and subject. Hold on. Subject, you underline the subject, purpose, the same thing with the previous format that we have talked about, purpose, and the body. So that's how again you start. And then remember, it has to be break down into paragraph. So here in this case, what you can do is why you are inviting the person, for what occasion in the next paragraph, and when do you expect him, the details can come in the next paragraph, then you give the closure. So that's how it should go about. Remember, as you can see, it also has the same format. Everything is on the left hand side, so you have no confusion there. I hope these tips help you to write your answers better. Now, in our previous class, we have discussed about Rip Van Winkle. So what you can do is, in order to help you understand it better, what you can do is, why don't you write a letter as Rip Van Winkle to a friend, let's say, and talked about how he had woke up after 20 years and find so many things that has changed. So when you do that, you would also be picking up a lot of information from that story. It will help you, drill the understanding of the story as well as practice your letter writing. So that's what you can try. Or you can also, if you want to try something else, a little like the invitation here, why don't you write a letter as Jean Valjean, or the convict. Remember, in our drama, we have the character convict, who, let's say, that started a reformatory place. You will find that on page, I will mention the page here. On page 203, writing section, you have a letter writing here. So what you can do is, as Jean Valjean, you write a letter to the bishop, inviting him to come and give a sermon or maybe a speech in that reformatory place. Reformatory place is a place where people who are having difficulties come together and heal or learn, okay? So let's say Jean Valjean had started such a place and you're writing a letter to the bishop. So that will also help you get a practice, again revise your lesson on the bishop's candlesticks and also practice your letter writing. Remember, writing needs practice. If you do not practice, you cannot just say that, oh, I know the format, this is this and that is that. You cannot simply go about in that way. So you need to practice or try to write it. You have all the informations there and the format is there. You know the stories now, so I'm sure you will not run out of words. So make sure that you practice it. And remember, when you are, very quickly, remember when you are writing an informal letter, pretend as though the person is sitting next to you. That always helps us the flow of the conversation, the style and so on. Then after you are done, always go for a checklist. Check whether all the important structure elements are there or not. Check whether you have given the sender's address for the date, check for the date, check whether you have the greeting section or not and so on. And most importantly, write it in paragraph. All right, most importantly, write it in paragraph. So on that note, we would be winding up our class for today. I hope you would go and practice those exercises which I have pointed out. And thank you all very much for joining me.